Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Bluesman by Andre Dubus III, read by Andre Dubus III. Haywood, Massachusetts. The Connecticut River sounded different every season. It was a gushing stone roller during the spring runoffs, a narrow and quiet flow in the summer that in the fall receded to a thin, clear wash, leaving banks of leaf-covered mud and sunken tree root until winter, when the Berkshire snows came and the ice formed over the rocks and the water gurgled beneath it all as though behind a mask. On its west bank, halfway through the trees up Saunders Hill, Jim Suther picked the guitar most every night. Though he was a white man, he only sang blues songs by men like Big Bill Brunsey, Mississippi John Hurt, Son House, and Champion Jack Dupree. After supper, he would cook for both himself and his 17-year-old son, Leo. Jim sat in the parlor on his stool in front of the window overlooking the woods, and he'd start to play. He sang all kinds of songs, some fast that Leo could hear in the kitchen while he was cleaning up or doing his homework, and he would tap his feet, or else slow ones like Lonesome Road, Up, Sometimes Down, and Motherless Child. Most times they were slow like that, and Leo would sit in the parlor and listen for a while. He liked to watch his father's face. That was easy to do because most times Jim kept his eyes closed while he picked and sang. Leo liked how soft it got around the mouth under his mustache, how tender-looking. And Jim was a big man, not tall and lean like Leo, but wide with thick legs, rounded shoulders, and upper arms that always needed more room than his shirt sleeves gave them. Wednesday nights, 4 or 5 men from Jim's union at Haywood Paper Products would drive up in their Ramblers and station wagons to play poker at the kitchen table and drink cold Narragansetts out of cans. Leo was already taller than some of the men, and they rarely talked to him like he was a junior at Haywood High School, graduating class of 1968. One man, Lars, who was bald and had a clean-shaven pink face, he was always telling jokes about men screwing women who weren't their wives. Sometimes he'd tease a punch as Leo passed the table on his way to the fridge, and he'd say, "Hey, Einstein, tell your pop to play some white music for a change." Leo would smile and raise his Coke in a mock toast, then go out to the parlor where Jim was bluesing it with Leo's uncle Ryder. That's what he liked Leo to call him, though he wasn't really his uncle. One night, Lars said to Ryder, "You're so skinny I can smell the shit in you still well." And Ryder was skinny. He also favored his left leg a little bit when he walked, and every day he wore his fake lizard-skin cowboy boots, even to the mill. But Wednesday nights he played the most wonderful instrument Leo could imagine on this earth, a German-made M. Hohner Marine Band harmonica, the harp of the blues, Ryder called it. He owned 9 of them he kept in a wide leather harness around his waist. Most of these were in different keys, though Leo knew 4 were in C, a bluesman standard. When Ryder played, he liked to stand, and he never opened his eyes at all, just cupped that silver mouth harp in his 2 hands, the left never moving, the right opening and closing, or staying still, depending on the effect he was trying for. When Leo's dad sang a train song, Ryder's harp sounded like a freightliner chugging down the rails. He'd suck out a long wah-wah whistle like you imagine hearing after midnight when a diesel's pulling through town with no one to appreciate it unless it makes some noise. Then, when Jim picked and sang a Saturday night special like Whoopin' the Blues or Sittin' on Top of the World, Ryder would rock back and forth on his feet and put both lungs to work with trills and flutters, throat pops and hand smacks, all the while staying in perfect time with Jim's guitar. On songs like that, Loud Lars and the other men would come in from the kitchen with their beers and smoking cigars. They'd tap their feet and let out a holler or two, and Jim and Ryder showed their appreciation by quickly sliding into 2 or 3 more room movers. But with the blues, Leo noticed, you couldn't go too long without coming back to a slow one that either made you sweetly downhearted or else reminded you of when you were. After 1 or 2 of those, Don't Mistreat Me or All Alone Blues, Lars and the others would either go back into the bright, smoky kitchen to finish their game, or else stub out their cigars, drain their beers, and call it a night. But the best part of Wednesday nights was right before all that happened, when the parlor was full of people with their eyes on Ryder and Leo's dad, when Jim Suther's guitar and wavering alto voice didn't just match Ryder's harmonica, but rose above it, so that Ryder was huffing to keep up, and the more he did that, the more Jim seemed to sit back, because now it was the number itself that had come alive. The wailing, woo-wahing, oh, she up and left me beauty of it, as if the song was now gentle flesh and blood that Ryder and Jim had no more hold on than moist-eyed, smiling Lars or the foot-stomping, hand-clapping rest of them. And while Leo clapped his hands in time, he would sometimes watch those faces that were soft with beer and wonder, even gratitude, in his father's house. Leo thought about girls and women then, and how content they'd be in this room, too, how sad it was that there never were any, and children, 6 or 7 of them, jumping up and down or curled up under blankets on the floor asleep. Chapter 1. Tonight, after the paper mill men had all gone home and Jim was placing his guitar in its case, Ryder sat on the couch and sipped a fresh Narragansett. He glanced over at Leo, still watching him from the corner chair near the window. The only light in the parlor came from the kitchen, and when their eyes met, Leo looked away and swigged his warm Coke. "Heads up!" Leo caught it just as he saw it, a cool, metal-worn Marine band. "It's a C. Next week I'll come over early if you want, show you a few tricks." Which he did. His Impala pulled into the yard just as Leo was in the kitchen, sopping up the last drippings of clam chowder from his bowl with a slice of Wonder Bread. It was mid-June. The sun had just slipped behind Saunders Hill, so the bark on the pines was gold and orange like there was a big fire nearby. Leo got up and rinsed his dish. He could smell the coffee his father had brewed before pouring it over ice and going outside for his after-supper stroll down to the river. Ryder walked in with his harmonica harness hanging over one bony shoulder, a 6-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon bottles in his hand. "I've been thinking about you on the way over here, Leo. Thinking about how to start you out on the harp of the blues. You, a very smart kid. And it came to me the big thing you should know up front." Ryder opened the fridge and put the beer inside. He walked to the stove and poured himself some coffee. "Yeah?" "You see, young buddy, the way I see it, there are thinkers in this world and there are feelers. Sometimes there's a little bit of both in one, but those fellows don't do much." Ryder sipped his coffee and looked at Leo. "You understand?" "Yep." "I was afraid of that." "What?" "That you'd get that concept right out of the chute. Thinkers are like that. Feelers take longer, but then they come up with a painting or a poem or a blues riff to show you what they see and hear." Leo shrugged. "But you play the blues like no tomorrow, and you just thought that all up." Ryder sipped his coffee. He looked at Leo over the cup. "All right, then, shit can by theory. But look, you have to start from scratch. When you play, you gotta feel something, not think it. That's all I'm saying. Now go get your harp before Larsmouth and the others show up at their piggy banks." In the parlor, Ryder cinched the harness in around his waist and pulled an A-harp from its sheath. "First thing you want to start doing, young buddy, is to listen very closely to everything you hear. Concentrate on this song. It's going to be your cherry breaker." He put a foot up on the windowsill and began to suck and blow the first few notes of a tune Leo had heard many times before. After Ryder played the intro, he sang the first verse. "My baby says she's leaving me, and I ain't done nothing wrong. My eyes on you, baby, you can't do me no harm. I got my eyes on you, I got my eyes on you, I got my eyes on you, woman, there ain't nothing in this world you can do." Ryder cupped the harp back to his mouth and played a pop-wailing riff that was so pure and heartfelt Leo's eyes got wet and he had to look down at the floorboards. Ryder's playing was a lot better than his singing, and when he finished the song, Leo said, "Teach me a number I don't have to sing in." "What have you got against crooning?" Nothing. Jim does it good, but I want to play, not croon. Show me some tricks. Ryder shook his head. His red chin stubble caught the dusk light and looked gold. Leo couldn't tell if he was smiling or not. Go look up trick in the dictionary, and I'll bet you'll find the word deception in there somewhere. Hear me, Leo. When you enter the world of music, real music, like from Beethoven on up to Big Bill Broonzy, you're stepping into Truth City. That's what it's all about, so no tricks, all right? Technique, yes. Tricks, no. You said tricks last week. You said you'll come over and show me some tricks. Forget last week and forget technique for now, too. When you hear a song you want to play, I want you to crawl inside it like it was a sleeping bag that maybe has a snake in it. What kind is it? How to get in there? What's it going to do now? You want to learn to play from the inside out. If you do it the other way, then you'll be pretending, and even somebody as thick as Lars will see that. Ryder smiled and tilted his head to better see Leo's face. See, musical people are important. If we can take what's in the air, pleasure or pain, and push it back out in a sound that lets people touch what they themselves are putting out, then you can call us bridges to Truth City. I like that, bridges to Truth City. And that's hands down better than being a party to Lion, don't you think? Leo nodded. Okay, then. Ryder pushed his harmonica back into its harness. Put yours away, too. First lesson's over. I want you to walk around all week trying to feel the meaning of things. We're not going to play anything? And when you find something that you're feeling strong about, young buddy, throw together a couple of verses on it. Forget I got my eyes on you. You tell me what you got your eyes on. Then we'll present that to Mr. Harp of the Blues. Next week, not tonight. First things first. Chapter 2. This was easy. This was a thing that didn't have to be thought about. Allie Donovan. Also a junior at Haywood High School, she was the only one who wore those bell-bottom jeans that were all floppy from the feet to the knees, but from there they straightened up and got very tight, hugging her thighs and round, soft-looking butt, even cleaving in a little at her crotch. She had green eyes, a tiny nose, and a wider-than-average mouth that was always either talking, laughing, or else being very quiet and still when no one else's was. She wore baggy white T-shirts that she tucked into her jeans, and even though she dressed like a boy, she was prettier than Nancy Titcomb and Anna Maria Slavic combined. Nancy's old man ran the bank or Haywood Electric or something, and Anna Maria, who wore imitation pearls to school a lot, was one of Tony Slavic's Chevrolet kids. Girls like that always dressed in skirts and blouses and dresses, period. They were still girls, hardly women, but they wore their hair like Lady Bird Johnson, who wore hers like Jackie Kennedy, who Leo figured wore hers like Anne Margaret or Liz Taylor. And in a strictly untouchable sort of way, these were good girls to look at, but it was the kind of good you feel when you see something new, Leo thought, like a gleaming red Schwinn bike, or even better, one of Slavic's sparkling white-walled four-on-the-floor Supremes. The exact moment you pause to appreciate its clean, beautiful newness is also the precise second you feel it pull away from you. It was Thursday, late June, and Leo sat 3 desks back from Allie, watching her. The air was hot, and even with the windows open, the room smelled like desk wood and B.O. sweat. The trees were leafed out green outside, and Leo heard a squirrel scampering up a trunk, down a limb, and off it to another. Most of the kids were asleep with their foreheads resting on their folded arms, but Allie was drawing something with 3 colored pencils. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a single braid. Her neck was long and already tanned, too. Whenever she dropped one color for the other, she'd turn her head sideways and look at her picture before she started up again. Leo lifted his chair when he scooted back so he wouldn't make any noise. Then he walked up the aisle, stood a desk's length behind Allie, and looked over her shoulder. With a blue pencil, she was sketching in a smoke trail that curled up from the chimney of a 3-story house. It had 4 white porch columns on the front like those mansions in the Civil War chapters of the U.S. history book, and to the right of the house was a huge tree with a noose hanging off one branch. "Is Allison's work more intriguing than yours, Mr. Suther?" At first, Leo didn't match Mr. Suther up with himself. But when Allie looked at Mr. Jewett, then up and back into Leo's face, Leo stared into her slightly startled green eyes and said, "Yes, it is," and he walked back to his desk and sat down. A few kids lifted their heads to see what was up. One of them was Leo's flat-top buddy, Jerry Poitras. He glanced at Leo and Mr. Jewett before going back to his nap. Allie Donovan turned around quickly but quietly. She smiled at Leo a good 4 seconds. That afternoon, while his father was still at the Elks, Leo sat at the kitchen table with his notebook and pen. "That Allie's got a neck so fine. I want to kiss it all the time. We got a house, me and her on the hill. It's got a porch bigger than the paper mill. Sometimes when we hug, I feel like I'm gonna explode. But then we do what we have to up there in our love abode." He signed it and called it the Love Abode. The following Wednesday, he handed it to Ryder, who held it up in the afternoon kitchen light and read it out loud. When he got to the part about exploding and doing what we have to, he laughed and shook his head, then laughed some more. "Now it's my turn." He showed Leo first how to hold his harmonica, how he should wedge the bass notes end of it between the thumb and forefinger of his left hand, so his right would be free to cup in around that harp, making an echo chamber in there he'll want to use later. Leo had long, thin fingers. Ryder's were long too, but meaty. He said short, fat fingers were best for the blues harp, the kind you get working with your hands your whole life, like cotton pickers or mill workers, something like that. But Leo, being only 17, he shouldn't worry about that because he was his father's son and was bound to flesh out more soon anyway. Right about then, Jim showed up in the kitchen doorway. He held a tall iced coffee with milk, and between his fingers was a smoking Lucky Strike. The sun was getting low behind Saunders Hill, so Leo couldn't see much of his face too well. Jim watched while Ryder showed his son how to find do, re, mi, then how to choke the mi note into a ma sound by constricting the airflow in the throat. All of this Leo picked up on by the second or third try, which surprised Ryder until Leo reminded him he'd been watching and listening to Ryder play since he could remember. "Your boy's a songwriter too, Jimmy. Did you know that?" Ryder started to unfold the Love Abode, but Leo touched his hand. Jim let smoke out his nose and walked over to the two of them near the window. He looked up at Leo. "I'll take a little credit for the music you might have in you, but whatever words way you conjure, you're getting from your mother. She was a poetess. I never told you that." Jim turned his back on them. Then he took his guitar out of its case and started to tune it up on his stool. Ryder winked at Leo and put the song back in his front shirt pocket behind 3 Haywood Paper Products ballpoint pens. Without glancing at his old man, Leo left the parlor and the house and walked down Saunders Hill Road. In the early evening light, the river was a slow-moving brown and blue. Its pebbled bank was pink in some places, gold in others, and Leo picked up 3 stones. He threw one in a high arc into the trees. He threw the other 2 downstream. One hit a boulder and bounced off it into the water. Leo didn't see where the other went, and he couldn't see why his father didn't have another woman yet either. Jim wasn't the only man to ever lose his wife. Jerry Poitras's mother left his dad to go live with a phone lineman in Springfield. That was when GP was 9 or 10. But he had a new mom now, a blonde woman with big breasts whose name was Betty. Jerry's old man had met her on a train to Boston on business. She had no kids of her own, and she seemed to like Jerry and his little sister Ruth as if she had invented them herself. And Mr. Poitras wasn't nearly as handsome as Jim Suther. He didn't have the muscle, he didn't have the thick black mustache, he probably couldn't pick a tune or sing a note. He just had a flat-top haircut like his son, a fat, close-shaved face like Lars, and a big round gut that always made his neckties look short and his pants too low. But still, he had Betty, and Jim had nothing but this piece of the Connecticut River every day at sundown. Leo wedged his sneaker under a softball-sized rock, picked up the stone, and threw it as far upstream as he could. It made hardly a splash, just got gulped into the current. A family of birds was making all sorts of sound above and behind him, and Leo thought he should get around to learning their names and migrating habits and stuff like that. Then he saw one up in an alder branch. The bird was all black except for the tips of its wings, which were bright red. Leo heard cars parking behind the house up the hill, the slamming of the screen door, Larza's laugh. When the door slammed again, the bird flew off the branch, out over the river, and into the trees on the other side. Ryder and Jim were playing already. The parlor windows had to be open because it sounded like the two men were standing right there behind Leo. It was a slow song, too, one he hadn't heard before, about a man who loses his family in a fire and keeps asking God, "How come hell came calling, Lord? How come?" Jim was singing clear and to the point, like he wanted an answer tonight. When Ryder's harmonica came sweeping in behind Jim's voice, it sounded like a chorus of, "Yeah, tell us, Lord. Why don't you tell us? Tell us right now." Leo began walking up the road, though he didn't want to get any closer to the poor meek chorus. He kept on until he reached the top of the hill where the gravel ended at Paper Boulevard, and he went right because a quarter-mile later was downtown, where on this side of the road was an S.O. station with 2 red pumps, then the Hungry Pioneer Inn and the red brick courthouse with the police station in the basement. Across the street, all on a raised concrete walkway with the same long slanted roof over their doors, was the hardware store, B&G Grocery, and Shorty's Billiards. Down the steps and farther down the sidewalk was the Fremont Theater where the Cincinnati Kid with Steve McQueen had been playing all week. Then came Thompson Green, a square park surrounded by white wood rails and granite posts, named after the town's only family to lose all 5 sons to Confederate cannonballs. This time of year the grass was thick and soft to sit on. There were a few trees, but not so many Leo and Jerry couldn't throw a football around if they wanted to. And in the middle of the park was a wooden gazebo that later in the summer would hold a string quartet from the Ladies' Auxiliary League, or a 6-piece brass section of fat guys who practiced in the American Legion building next to the Elks Club on the other side of town. They play songs like Green Sleeves, then the Battle Hymn of the Republic, followed by Home on the Range. But past the green and the goofy gazebo was where Leo was hiking to. Beatrice's UFO show. That's what it was called, though the only thing UFO-ish about it was that it was silver and metal, and on top of the cash register was glued a plastic model of a flying saucer. By the time Leo got through town into Thompson Green, the sun was down and he was sweating. When he saw all the Buick Wildcats and Ramblers, even a motorcycle in Beatrice's lot, he wished he'd gone back into his house to change into a fresh shirt and comb his hair, which lately he'd been letting grow out at the top. Jerry's after-school shift got over at 7, and Leo was going to meet him at the back door so they could pal around a while, maybe go to Jerry's house, which was only a half-mile back through Haywood and down the same road the school was on. He hoped that's what they were going to do. It was a weeknight, so he'd only be able to stay an hour or so, but that would be 60 minutes in a living room where the whole Poitras family was gathered together until bedtime. GP's father would be in the big chair under the stand-up lamp. His shoes and tie would be off, his white shirt unbuttoned past his T-shirt collar. Sometimes he'd have a bunch of papers laid out on his briefcase in his lap. Jerry's sister Ruth, who was 12 and pudgy but cute in the face, she'd be in her pajamas already, lying belly down on the rug watching Danny Kaye or the Patty Duke Show. Betty always sat on the side of the couch closest to the kitchen in case anybody needed anything. Most times when Leo was there with Jerry, she'd bring them tall glasses of cold chocolate milk and a plate of warm oatmeal cookies. Once, Betty patted Leo's arm and remarked how nice it was having him over. She went back to her knitting, and Jerry whispered in Leo's ear how she just found out he didn't have a mother. Who knows, maybe she'll let you touch her boobs. From the parking lot, Leo could hear the jukebox playing inside Beatrice's. The box tops, it sounded like, though with all that laughing and talking going on in there, he couldn't be sure. He walked around to the kitchen door out back. Somebody had stuck a mop handle under the knob to hold it wide open, and Leo smelled fry grease and dish soap, heard meat sizzling, something else getting water sprayed. He poked his head inside and looked left down at the pots and pan sink, because where else would a night manager who thinks he's funny put a kid named Poitras? But it wasn't flat-top tubby Jerry Leo saw there. Instead, he found himself looking at a girl's back. Her blonde hair was tied off in a braid. Her apron strings dangled right along her round and soft-looking butt. "Hey, Suther, look." Jerry stood to the right of the door in an all-white fry cook uniform. On his blocky head was a white cap with UFO printed above the visor. He held both arms out and turned around in a circle. "Promotion of the summer, man. More money, more grease, no pots. I'm in training, so I'll see you later. My old man's picking me up at 8. Jerry went back to the fryer layer next to the grill and Beatrice's huge 30-year-old brother Sidney, who always sweated and never smiled. At the wash sink, Allie Donovan was untying her apron, smiling at Leo as she did. "Since when do you work here?" "About an hour. My real shift starts next week, you know, when summer starts." "Oh." She dropped her apron in a canvas hamper and smiled at him. "Come to walk me home?" "Where's that?" "Spoon Hill." Spoon Hill was a mile north of Beatrice's on the other side of the river. The closest way across was back through town to the covered bridge built out behind the Hungry Pioneer Inn in the courthouse building. Leo and Allie walked through the parking lot to Thompson Green. She jumped over the white rails onto the grass, and when Leo did the same, she called him a copycat, walking backwards, smiling. "Who, me?" "Is Allison's work more intriguing than yours, Mr. Suther?" "Maybe." Allie turned and ran to the gazebo, her braid bouncing and swaying against her neck. Leo couldn't believe his good luck, and he wasn't going to jinx it by running after her either. The night air smelled like pine sap and the friar-laters from Beatrice's. He walked slow and straight as Big Bill Brunsey. When he got to the gazebo steps, he stopped and watched Allie up on the floor, swinging her arms in little semicircles like a conductor. She stopped almost as soon as she started, though. They were both quiet a second. Leo put his foot up on a stair. "You want to live in that mansion you were drawing?" "Want? Do I want? That's immaterial, Mr. Suther. You like that word? I just learned it. I love it. I'll probably have to use it down in Mississippi. Jackson, to be precise." "Jackson? Oh, yes, didn't I tell you?" Allie jumped again, this time over the steps onto the grass. "My dad fixes up old houses. Everybody talks about having a new home, but you know, Leo, a lot of people out there like old houses more. They don't admit it, though." Allie put her hand loosely inside his, and they began walking across the grass to Paper Boulevard. Leo wondered when she thought she would have told him anything, being this was the first time they'd ever said 2 words to each other. Once or twice her hip rubbed his, and Leo felt the beginnings of an erection that he hoped wouldn't point in any sort of way noticeable. "You're moving? "Yep, my mom and dad and 3-year-old brother and me, all 4 of us. And we're going to be living in a trailer home on this grand plantation while my dad rebuilds a real southern mansion with a bunch of other men." "Then you'll come back." "Come back? Why? What in the world is going on in Haywood, Massachusetts? Do you know I'll probably meet some disgusting Ku Klux Klan men face to face? And with all that water hosing and dogging going on down there with the Negroes, why, I'll be in a very exciting place, Leo, very exciting." "Water hosing and dogging? Don't tell me you don't watch the news, Leo Suther. You're one of the smartest kids around." "We don't have a television set." "Us either, but I bet you read the whole newspaper every day." "Sometimes." Which was true. If he was finished with his homework, and if Jim was done with the Globe, had maybe gone to bed already, Leo would sit at the kitchen table with a Coke and glance through the pages about this and that, what Governor Volpe was doing at the State House, what movies were coming out. And he had seen things in the national news section about trouble in the South and lately Michigan and New Jersey, even Boston.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?